President Trump gave multiple warnings to Iran. President Trump has been very direct. He is only worried about one thing: national security interest of the American people. We have watched countless lives lost under Iran. We have watched countless individuals murdered. We have watched even a threat against President Trump, an assassination threat that was funded by Iran. Nobody wants forever wars. I'll be the first one to raise my hand to say we cannot live through Afghanistan, we cannot live through Iraq or any other wars in the future. But President Trump has demonstrated he has ended 8 wars and conflicts. He has demonstrated he is continuing to rebuild and leave areas more peaceful than where they were the last 4, 8, 12 years. So that is the goal today. This will be short-lived. This will end quickly. And President Trump is like no other president.
Hi, welcome to the Times of India. Joining me today is Meek Cooke, a Republican lawyer and a Trump supporter. As a political operative, she has served in the Ohio governor's office and remains a key player in Ohio GOP politics. Ms. Cooke, welcome to the show. How do you assess the current U.S. strategy towards Iran?
Thank you for having me. The U.S. strategy has been very strong. In fact, it's the first time in 50 years we have a president that not only drew a red line, but now has initiated an entire international strike to make sure that people know that we are not going to allow Iran to hold nuclear weapons. We have been held hostage for far too long between our oil prices, the American lives lost at the hand of the Iranian regime, and they had every opportunity to work with us. And what Iran has done, and I think you've seen this, is they've alienated not only their Gulf allies, but so many other countries are now getting on board to say, we want the end of terror and for some stability and peace in the Middle East.
I'll come to what's actually happening there, because Iran has been saying that these are all at least the attacks on many of the Gulf nations are false flag operations. But I'll come to that. But let's talk about President Trump for a moment. He promised an end to the endless wars and regime change operations. What changed in just 1 year, starting from Venezuela, now Iran, and now possibly even Cuba?
Well, President Trump has been a president who has extremely been focused on peace. He has ended 7 wars and conflicts since he's held office. But that doesn't mean when you're a president of peace that you're just going to sit down and allow threats of terror to continue to escalate. What it does mean is complete strength in ensuring that he's going to come in and make sure that U.S. interests are protected. I think everybody uses the word peace, but doesn't understand peace through strength, which means defending America and its interests at times like this. And we were in a crisis with Iran. We knew through the Geneva Convention that they weren't going to negotiate in good faith, and they were continuing to stockpile not only nuclear weapons, uranium enrichment, and continue to be a threat to the United States. So do we wait the next 4 years to see when Iran strikes us, or do we strike first? And President Trump drew a red line in the sand and made sure that they knew if they weren't going to work with us under a security cooperation, we were going to strike.
But President, many in the MAGA base, your own people, they're feeling betrayed by his attack on Iran. That is actually costing US billions from taxpayers' dollars every day. This is in addition to the human cost of this campaign.
There is definitely a division and mixed sentiment. And let me say, I think this is mixed sentiment across the US and across the world, including India, because what happens when you go to war? Nobody wants war. The president didn't want war. It immediately impacts our economy, our oil prices, which is fundamental. Energy infrastructure is actually driving up from gas to shipping prices to groceries and everything else. We lived through 4 years of horrific inflation under Joe Biden. We don't want to live through that again. But this is where President Trump isn't playing politics. We have the midterms just coming up. He's not looking at a short-term gain. He's looking at long-term generational success for the United States. And part of that meant making sure a terror regime, the first and the biggest in the entire world, was immediately stopped. he's been very clear. He's continued to say Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are the greatest and single most threat to our country and the entire world. And Iran did not take this seriously.
But why strike now? The timing? You said yourself that the midterms are around the corner. This could have happened after the midterms, maybe, if he wanted to sort of keep the MAGA base united, who are against, at least those within MAGA who are against these forever wars. Because many are complaining also that the US is playing into the hands of the Israel lobby with these strikes. What was the direct threat to the US right now that these strikes were launched?
Well, the reason we are striking now, and again, I'm not in the Situation Room, but everything the president has said and the Secretary of Defense has said is we're striking because we had good information and good intel that a threat was imminent to the United States, that Iran was not going to back down. So do we sit on our hands and do we wait for them to strike us, or do we show force? President Trump gave multiple warnings to Iran. So for us to sit back and play politics, that's what that is. When you say, I'm going to strike after the midterms, after the Republican Party is safe. He's not playing politics. President Trump has been very direct. He is only worried about one thing: national security interest of the American people. We have watched countless lives lost under Iran. We have watched countless individuals murdered. We have watched even a threat against President Trump, an assassination threat that was funded by Iran. At some point, we have to draw the line. So the timing was crucial. We needed to make sure that we were going to stop and prevent a future threat. And at this point, that's all the information we have. Do I know what the exact threat was? Do I know what the exact intel was? No, but I have 100% faith in this president. He has stopped 8 wars. This is what peace means. It's peace through strength. You can't sit here and continue to use, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris use the tactic of don't. What does don't mean? Don't means Iran continued to subvert security agreements. Don't meant Iran continued to smuggle oil through the Strait of Hormuz through different channels. Don't meant they continue to use the UAE to fund their terror proxies. And they don't fight fair. This war is not in Iran. They're using proxies across the Gulf states, Houthis and Hezbollah and so many other terror proxies that have continued to decimate lives. This has nothing to do with Israel. If you just look at the United States, this is for our interests. And today, when you look at the global sphere, yes, it aligns with Israel as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're an ally, they're a partner, just like India.
But it's not been that easy to affect regime change in Iran, is it? So far, Trump earlier said 3 to 4 weeks, and now his war secretary Pete Hegseth has admitted that it might take as many as 8 weeks. The whole point of these strikes is Iran's nuclear program, which Tehran has repeatedly said is not their end game. Is Iran therefore likely to turn into another Iraq?
No, the difference is when you look at Iraq and even Afghanistan, the mistakes that previous administrations made is that we put boots on the ground and then tried to implement our culture, our policies, our way of democracy. That's not what we're doing, and nor should it be. What President Trump wants is a leader that we can work with and trust. For Iran to say they don't have nuclear weapons and capabilities is just laughable. Look at history and look at what they have already done to some of their Gulf states, some of their Muslim brothers that they should have been standing with. And for them to even continue to strike without thought on civilians, on airports, is just despicable. So the trust me, that doesn't work. It's trust but verify. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing. And in terms of timeline, everybody wants this to end soon. That's one thing I can tell you without even polling Americans. 100% of us want a very swift action. This takes time. You're seeing this, and I'm waiting for the Gulf states. I'm praying for them, not only to play defense, but to play offense because their lives are at stake.
All right. Iran is claiming a lot of false flag operations. The drones have been striking Saudi, of course, as you pointed out, all the regional allies, Saudi, Jordan, UAE, Cyprus, everybody is complaining. Azerbaijan, the drones have hit all these countries, but Iran is saying that many of them are false flag operations, that the hits and the drones and the missiles are not coming from Iran but from Israel to turn these states against Iran. What do you have to say about that?
I say it's a flat out lie. Ask any state leader that has come and said that they're 100% going to defend themselves. Go ask the Saudis who the missiles are coming from. It's so easy to deflect and cause chaos during war, but every single Gulf state that has come out unified, that's the one thing. This is the first time I'm seeing unity against Iran. For so long, we saw what I call fence sitters. They would sit there, they just wanted peace, and they continued to appease Iran. Every single leader that I have seen, including Saudi Arabia, has come out and said, we're going to defend our Muslim brothers. For them to claim false flags, I mean, ask each country where those missiles are coming from. Make no mistake, this is Iran, and they have continued to show their arrogance because they have said, if the United States does not leave, we will continue to attack.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has admitted, and he was in a press conference yesterday morning, I think. He said that yes, the Iranian missiles will still, sort of hit U.S. targets, but they are sort of doing they are going to continue striking Iran. But he admitted that Iranian missiles are penetrating the interceptors, the American interceptors in these countries. Now, these are very low cost drones versus very expensive interceptors, multi-million interceptors. How do Iran's strategy, Iran's war strategy, and I know you, I'm no, you're not a defense expert, but I would just like to understand, uh, is Iran proving a difficult adversary?
They aren't. And look at how they're strategically attacking. If you were Iran today and you know your greatest threat is the United States because you've been chanting death to America for 50 years, and then Israel, you would continue to do coordinated strikes that are directly at Israel and maybe even some of the US bases. Instead, they're hitting airports, they're hitting hotel districts, they're hitting areas where civilian life is not only matters, but exists. They have no thought about the Gulf states. They're only in immediate hyper defense mode, which means that they are completely out of touch with how they are defending their country. And what the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, made clear is as Iran is attacking, we've actually been able to stop about 80% of their missiles through our defense technology. And that is a success. But for anybody to think that we're just going to pick up and leave because the supreme leader has been eliminated and because we've removed dozens of leaders in the regime is wrong. Until there's not somebody that is instated that we can actually work with, until we have not decimated every single nuclear facility and their ability to make more, right? This isn't a short-term game, it's a long-term plan. We do not intend to leave. We intend to protect American interests.
And how, in your estimate, how long is that going to take? How long is the Middle East going to burn?
Well, everybody wants to treat this as a lunch date. I don't have a timeline, but what I can tell you is that the president is extremely focused on making sure that this is short, quick, strategic, and he is able to leave a blueprint for a generation to come on how to go in and impact regime change. We are not trying to get boots on the ground. We're not trying to run a government. We just want to work with somebody who is not going to stockpile nuclear weapons. There's a religious fundamental ideology there that is hard to break. That is what the US is focused on right now. So I think it will be short, but I can't give you weeks or a month's timeline.
6 US soldiers, however, have already been killed early in the conflict. As the war progresses, which it's likely to, given how things are going, the body count may go up. And let me just come back to the MAGA base again. This is not going to sit well in MAGA, which has decried the forever wars of Obama or Biden?
First of all, the soldiers and the lives that we've lost, it's not only American soldiers, it's devastating. It's devastating for any country to have to go through this, and our hearts go out to those soldiers and their families. We know what we signed up for the minute somebody puts on a uniform to say, I'm going to defend the United States. We know how important and threatening Iran has been to engage in this at this moment in history. I'm part of the MAGA base. I 100% support President Trump. I also trust his judgment. Nobody wants forever wars. I'll be the first one to raise my hand to say we cannot live through Afghanistan. We cannot live through Iraq or any other wars in the future. But President Trump has demonstrated he has ended 8 wars and conflicts. He has demonstrated he is continuing to rebuild and leave areas more peaceful than where they were the last 4, 8, 12 years. So that is the goal today. This will be short-lived. This will end quickly. And President Trump is like no other president. His mission is peace. It's not permanent occupation. And that's a game changer.
But you are a MAGA base and you support Trump, but there are many within MAGA, and I can name quite a few of them, prominent ones, who do not support this. And between the Epstein files and the anti-war sentiment among many of Trump supporters, are there grounds there to break away from him?
I think that as long as President Trump continues to put pressure and continues to ensure this is a short war, we will not have issues with the MAGA base. And part of that is communication. It's constantly explaining what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why the operation was necessary. And in terms of the Epstein file, I know everybody loves to talk about this. Joe Biden held on to these Epstein files for 4 years. President Trump and his team are continuing to release them. And like everybody in the country, regardless of our politics, we want arrests. We want justice. I'm also waiting for those victims to come out that and say, I was a victim of person X, and I want some type of accountability and the rule of law to work. So for us to put the Epstein files on President Trump's lap it just doesn't make sense. If anything, he's actually ensured transparency, just like he's doing with this war. He's been very clear from the get-go exactly where he stands. He ended a war of 47 years. He didn't start it. He actually had the backbone to end it.
Okay, but even if there are, let's say, if Republicans lose midterms, is there a possibility that Trump could face impeachment? Remember, he has hinted at such a possibility earlier, and hence I ask.
Of course. I mean, have you met the Democrat Party? It's not the party of Bill Clinton. All the Democrats have tried to do is obstruct. They want to continue illegal immigrants in our country. They celebrate mass murder anytime it occurs of American citizens rather than calling it out vehemently. They have continued to gaslight every single step the president has taken to make sure we have peace and safety and security. And now they are stopping the funding of the Department of Homeland Security at a time when it's the most critical. So the Democrat Party is not recognizable in the United States anymore. The only person that has some sense is Senator John Fetterman, who is part of the Democrat Party, but still will side with common sense. You don't have to be Republican, just have some common sense. And with this war, even Democrats today are obstructing, saying the president doesn't have the authority. Well, let me tell you, since World War II, no president has declared war, yet we've had conflicts across the nation, and we've engaged in wars. Libya, Afghanistan, the list goes on. So for Democrats to continue to obstruct, it doesn't surprise me, but that's not going to stop President Trump's agenda. Remember, over 77 million Americans voted for him, and we're going to continue to push for a place of peace, strength, and most importantly, safety for American citizens. Our national security has been at risk for 4+ years under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
At least you're calling it a war in Iran, because that's not what the House Speaker said. He didn't. He said this is not a war.
Well, he hasn't declared a war, right? In legal terms, of course, Congress hasn't come in and said a war. But if I was living in Israel today, if I was living in the region, I would call it a war. But for a formal declaration of Congress, that's a step that they take. So I 100% stand with the speaker. He's not going to say this is an act of war. And I haven't said the president engaged in an act of war. All I've said is we're in war. If you were living in those conflict-torn areas today, you would say we're in war. But it never stopped. I don't think anybody realizes when you go to Israel, and I've spent 10 days there, and every second you wonder, Is this my last second? Am I just going to live in a bomb shelter every time the sirens go off? That's no way to live. This is going to give peace not only to Israel, but all of the Gulf states. And most importantly for India, I know 90% of your oil supply is actually going through the Strait of Hormuz. We've had 5 to 6 conflicts since 1979 where your oil prices are inflating. Nobody wants this. Everybody wants stability there. And this is where President Trump is thinking on his feet. He's offering insurance to the carriers that are going through the Strait of Hormuz to make sure that oil continues to go. But we're going to see some short-term pain for long-term gain. And we're seeing this even in the United States. So this is a difficult time, but it's not something we can't get past. And I know through President Trump's leadership, we will. He's already proved himself. And he was elected for the second time because we have faith in his diplomatic policy and the way that he has continued to strengthen relations. He is the reason we have the Abraham Accords, and he is the reason we will continue to strengthen, rebuild, and increase participation for peace.
Good that you brought up oil prices, because Qatar has today warned that the prices may even go up to $150 per barrel if the strikes don't end soon. It's likely to, it's a big kick to the entire world, really, not just India.
You're right. I mean, we lived through Joe Biden. We paid $11,000 a year more under his economy, $44,000 for Americans as we tried to make ends meet. We know what happens when oil prices increases. Everything increases. They're up 30 cents right now in the United States. But this is where Joe Biden would talk about inflation being transitory. I know what this war does. This war is going to spike energy prices for a short amount of time, this conflict in the region. But the minute that we're able to end it, the minute Iran is able to actually put up a leader that we can work with, that the entire world can work with, that isn't ready to stockpile nuclear weapons and enrich uranium, we'll actually get to a place where we'll have stability for the long haul. I mean, this is where you have to make that estimation. From 1979 to date, we have had spikes in oil. It didn't just happen through this conflict in Iran. It has been occurring for 47 years. So do you sit on your hands and continue to allow it to occur? Or do you say, I'm with you, United States, and I'm going to work with you and make sure that this country, this regime never impacts our oil prices again, our economy, and our billions of people in India?
Okay, lastly, on India, an India-specific question. Stock Percent has said that the US is easing sanctions on Russian oil sales to India during this Iran conflict. So when it suits the US, it is fine to buy from Russia, and when it does not suit you, then there is a 50% tariff. How does that work? Because the Indian External Affairs Minister has clearly pointed out, even today he said, that there is no more hegemon in this world, but this seems pretty hegemonic behavior.
Well, tariffs are a tool in President Trump's toolkit. It's something that he's been using to ensure that we can have stability, even in the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's all about dismantling economic security when there's a war. But times have changed right now. During a conflict in Iran, the number one thing we need to do is make sure that not only the U.S. has oil supplies, and we have a lot of natural gas on our own, but he's also lifted the amount that India can purchase. And so we're working in tandem to make sure that we can resolve the conflict in Iran. And then, yes, of course, in Russia and Ukraine, that is a secondary issue, and we have to resolve that. But from what we're seeing today, Russia and Ukraine have both backed off, and they're waiting for this conflict to resolve. There's a lot of issues on the table, but the number one issue, we can't continue to empower countries like Russia either, and China. They are bigger threats than anybody else can imagine. It's Iran, Russia, and China. And so we are strategically looking at all the pieces on the chessboard to say, what are the things we have to accomplish today versus what are the things we need to accomplish tomorrow? But President Trump has also worked with India to say, please go ahead and buy oil from Russia. We understand prices are inflating, and they're working with India. That's part of our ally and strategic alliance that we've had with the country. So for you to think that just because we impose a tariff tomorrow doesn't mean we can't change our mind, I mean, that's a negotiating leverage.
And okay, so my last question to you then. Will and your final thought on this? Will this hurt Republicans' chances in the midterms? Because it's not as easy to convince the Americans, given the polls that are happening, that the war in Iran is something that is good for them.
Well, we're in March. We have a long way to go until the midterms. And I do think that this conflict should resolve. And as President Trump continues to educate and share intel with the American people, we are going to see the importance of regime change. But right now, the midterms are going to be hard. Before Iran, the midterms were hard because we had 4 years of inflation that we're trying to undo. We had 4 years of a border crisis where Biden and Kamala Harris allowed illegals into our country, terrorists, rapists, thugs, you name it, and fentanyl. So we inherited a mess, and President Trump is trying to get out of it. So there's no question, even before Iran conflict, we were going to have a tough time in the midterm. But that's not just a President Trump issue. Every president during the midterm faces backlash. It's how we deal with it. And what President Trump is saying is, regardless of the midterms, I'm worried about America first and generations to come, my kids and your kids, which means we had to engage to level the threat and to ensure American security and safety.
All right. Thank you so much, Meek Cooke, for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you, viewers, for watching this broadcast. Stay tuned to the Times of India. Thank you, Meek.
Thank you.